We are currently lined up to kick off the playoff quarterfinals of the 2024 college football season. It's Texas taking on Arizona State. The Sun Devils, despite being the higher seed, were underdogs and painfully so. Not only did people only believe that they got to the bye week due to some sort of fluke and technicality, but they didn't even think they should be in the playoffs at all and should have been one of the teams given the boot for an Ole Miss or Alabama. But one man had almost single-handedly got them there, and one man was about to stun the world on the biggest stage of his career up to this point. This is the story of the grittiest, nastiest football player I've ever seen, the story of Cam Skattebo.
Looking for Skattebo, and he gets up. Flag is down. Stiff arm, helmet off, as it is an explosive play and driving those legs. Skattebo has done it. We are all tied up in the ATL.
Now, to get a real understanding of just how important Cam Skattebo is, we're going to have to go back to before his arrival. Now, for Arizona State fans, this might be a bit painful of a journey for you, so just buckle in tight. Now, I'm going to be as charitable as I can be because this was also an unprecedentedly strong time in the Pac-12, and with as high a parity as they had it, in my opinion, this was the reason that they disbanded so they could go to easier conferences, but we're going to get to that. So, Arizona State, outside of their Week 1 win against an FCS opponent, would have a pretty rough go at it. They'd be taken off by number 11 Oklahoma State, number 13 Utah, number 6 USC before they would pull off a gutsy upset against the Huskies and then lose to Stanford, claiming their free win against Colorado and then losing the rest of the way against number 12 UCLA, a solid Wazoo team, and number 23 Oregon State and Arizona, who was right about to turn the corner. It was clear that they needed some major changes. They released the current coaching staff and brought in Oregon's offensive coordinator Kenny Dillingham, as well as a slew of recruits, including one who got kind of glossed over, which was this FCS All-American running back who was coming off of just a ridiculous season. I mean, this kid rushed for 1,300 yards. He was the conference offensive player of the year. But you know what? He couldn't block for himself apparently, so the next year it was more of the same. Despite the new management and a new running back, Arizona State just didn't have the pieces in place to do, well, anything. And even though they easily had an even harder schedule than last year, it didn't make it any easier to watch. Oklahoma State worked them. Fresno State pitched a disgusting shutout, forcing Arizona State to go through 3 of their quarterbacks and Skattebo only getting 5 touches for 15 yards, and it was just downhill from there. USC, Cal, Colorado, and Washington were all able to put them down, and while 3 of those games came down to last-second things not going ASU's way to hand them a loss, it was actually going to get worse as the season went on as Utah absolutely clapped them. Oregon gave them an ungodly beating before their last game. Arizona just put absolute belt to ass for the better part of 4 quarters in a disgusting 59-23 victory. And during all of this, Skattebo had been kept largely at bay, going from an exciting pickup in the offseason to just another player getting pushed through the meat grinder of the Pac-12, as he currently ran for only 783 yards and 9 touchdowns. But then the offseason came, the Pac-12 all but officially dissolved, and Arizona State found themselves suddenly in the Big 12, where he would go from running against balanced teams to the offensive version of the Wild Wild West. And to put it frankly, I don't think anybody was ready for what was about to come. Enter 2024 with mild optimism, the hope of a new season, and a pissed off running back. They came out absolutely slaughtering Wyoming. And well, yes, this is supposed to be their out of conference cupcake match. I mean, it wasn't even close. Yeah, Cam and the offensive crew would be balling out, but their defense was putting on an absolute clinic, holding them to 0 points pretty much the entire game and getting a pick 6 and fumble 6 to ice the cake. But this would do little to change the perception of their team until the following week they would come up and get a chance to set themselves apart with an SEC opponent. And not just any SEC opponent, but Mississippi State, the SEC equivalents of themselves. And though on paper it would appear to be a relatively even matchup, somebody was about to break the parity, and that someone was Cam Skattebo. This game against Mississippi State, he would run for 262 yards, just crushing any dreams that the Bulldogs have of being in this game, despite a late second half comeback attempt. And when you combine his 35 yards of receiving, he was not only their leading rusher and receiver, but accounted for almost 300 yards all by himself, which for a running back is insane. But you may be wondering, why wasn't he making more headlines? And it's because through the first 2 games, there was another man who was hogging all the spotlight. Another running back named Ashton Jeanty, who ran for 459 yards, with 192 of those being against the number 7 team in the country, putting him immediately in the spotlight as the best running back this year. And this Arizona State team was still honestly looking for their identity. Their following week against Texas State, it was like they just couldn't run the ball anymore. Cam was held to 62 yards on 24 carries. Their defense did come up with a key stop in the fourth quarter to take the lead, but Texas State should not have been giving them this much trouble early on in their season. And by Texas Tech week, things really looked like they were starting to fall apart. The Red Raiders jumped to a 24-10 lead by the middle of the third, and here they would need something special, so they start to get creative to get the ball into Cam's hands in different ways. And man, does it pay off. 66 yards later, he set up at the 3. One handoff later, and ASU was beginning to march back into this game. Their next 2 drives stall out as Tech adds 2 field goals to their lead, but with 3 minutes left on the clock, they just try to put it in Cam's hands as much as they can, and my God, that was a good strategy. Before you know it, they had driven to the 3-yard line and were handing it off to the Scat Pack to punch it in, and they were relying so much on him that even on their onside attempt, they had him lined up, ready to go make a play by any means necessary. Against Kansas, he would absolutely torch their defense, running for 180 yards, as he was an integral part in pulling off a 4-point win, but at this point, they had still beat nobody. Every team was either unranked or had losing records except for Texas State, and now their biggest challenge was coming to Phoenix. The Utah Utes, currently ranked number 16, with their only loss coming the week before, and had been dominating teams. I mean, they just knocked off number 14 Oklahoma State a few weeks ago, so this would be no easy. Oh my God. The human Scat Pack just steamrolled their defense, accounting for 199 yards and 2 touchdowns. And we're getting to the point in the season where teams know he's coming and still can't stop him. But the following week, it looked like all of this was coming to an end. A good Cincinnati team had their number. They were playing great in the interior. They held Cam to just 75 yards, so a pair of missed field goals made this game completely out of reach. So despite some late game heroics like on this busted play, still being able to find the end zone, it was do or die time every single game. And not just that, but they were now going into easily the hardest stretch of their schedule. Unfortunately, no one told Skattebo that, as Oklahoma State was the first to be on the receiving end of just an absolutely pissed off Cam. 23 carries, 153 yards, as well as 4 receptions for another 121 yards. Cam wasn't just a key part of their offense this game, he was very clearly their entire offense as they stomped the Cowboys. The following week, he was going to miss that game due to a shoulder injury, and it would be completely exposed how important he was. Against UCF, a team currently 4-5, but 2-4 in the Big 12, their offense looked inept without him. They passed the ball for just 161 yards, rushed for just 99, and the only way they were able to escape with a win was due to their special teams and defense pulling off a huge block punt, getting a key turnover, and having UCF miss a pair of field goals to allow Arizona State to win by 4. And while the rest of their schedule was now hoping and praying he would miss more games, the next week, he was back and out with a vengeance. Against a stacked 7-3 Kansas State team, they would throw everything in the box to stop him, and it came at the cost of opening up the pass game for Sam Leavitt, who had arguably the best game of his season, slinging it for 275 yards and 3 touchdowns, while their defense absolutely stifled the Kansas State offense in a statement win, not just to move Arizona into the top 25, but to show they were ready to play against the best of the best, seemingly out of nowhere. BYU, now not knowing what to do except try to play a more balanced defense, only ended up finding a ground and pound masterclass by Cam waiting for them as he tore them for 147 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. He was unstoppable as they knocked off the one-loss conference leaders and were now taking their spot at the head of the Big 12. And as they walked into Arizona, the Cats were begging they didn't remember what happened the year before, but they most certainly did. So for all 4 quarters, it was foot to ass. Cam with his foot on the throat of the Cats as he torched them for 177 yards and 3 touchdowns, while Leavitt didn't want to be left out, so he threw for 291 yards and 3 touchdowns himself. And going into the Big 12 championship, they were just firing on all cylinders. Iowa State stood no chance. Cam ran for over 10 yards a carry, getting 170 yards by himself, as well as a pair of passes for another 38 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was electric. He had his team on his back, and he had almost no national recognition as the Heisman race was dominated by a name you heard earlier, Ashton Jeanty. But a problem was about to arise. You see, both of these two players were carrying their lackluster offenses when they weren't on the field into the playoffs, and now had to go against teams with more depth and significantly better rosters. And we all watched in dismay as Penn State showed us what we thought was a sign of what was going to come, as they were just dismantling the Broncos. Jeanty, who at this point it would have been laughable to compare Cam Skattebo to, was in complete lockdown. They gave him the ball 30 times and he was barely getting 3 yards a pop with almost no explosive plays. This forced Boise State to try to throw the ball and their offense was exposed. 3 interceptions, final score 31-14. Star player held to just 126 yards on 33 touches as we turned our eyes to the next game, fearing more of the same. We all knew what this team looked like if Texas could shut down Cam, and that we would expect more of what we had just witnessed the night before. And as the game opened up, it looked like our worst nightmares were coming true. Outside of their first run by Cam, it took everything in their power to seemingly gain an inch. Their first drive was kept alive by 2 Texas penalties, and even then, they were just barely able to squeak out a field goal, where immediately after 2 plays, Texas covered 77 yards for a touchdown before the Sun Devils got stuffed for another 2-yard drive, punted it to have that get returned for a touchdown, and have their ensuing drive go nowhere. It was like turning on your car and seeing every single light on your dashboard blinking, as well as smoke coming from the engine. But Arizona State now had to rely on their sneakily strong defense to force a punt, settle in, and do what they do best: find ways to get Skattebo the ball. From here, their passing game started to click a bit, which is exactly what they need if Cam was going to do anything. But as they march down to the 25-yard line, they get faced with a 4th and short, and they come up short again. But Texas wasn't going to let them off the hook easily. They immediately drive the length of the field and kick a field goal of their own to push this to a 3-score game before, again, Arizona State would make some traction, but on 4th and 10 fail to get the first, as even their final drive, they were doing everything to get Cam the ball in space to just move the ball into the red zone for their field goal to get blocked. So while it looked like this game was going as bad, if not worse, than what happened with Penn State the night before, if there's one thing as a team you didn't want to do, it was play against a pissed off Cam. And that first half seemed to do more than get under his skin. The defense opened the second half by standing firm to get a stop, and the offensive drive that followed it was textbook. They utilized now more zone reads, so their quarterback was forcing the defense to not all collapse on Cam unless they wanted to be part of his highlight reel, as he put up their biggest run of the night, and almost immediately after they hand it right off to Cam, who seemed to have a message he wanted to send to the safety: get out of my way. But once again, they get down to the 2-yard line. Arizona State gets stuffed, and they needed something huge from their defense, and in their most dire time, helmet meets ball in end zone, and it's a safety. Arizona State gets the ball off, and now they know what they have to do. We are going to hand the ball to Cam 4 times in a row, and what's going to happen is he's going to give you a gritty 47 yards, falling forward every single time, and you can see the safeties are no longer tackling with the same intensity as before. The indomitable spirit of Cam is shining through, even down 12 points. But the drive once again stalls in the red zone, and once again, Texas finds a way to answer the call with a 13-play, 67-yard drive to bring this to a 24-8 game. But for every problem Texas presented, Arizona State had an answer. They drive again before getting to a 4th down where they knew it was all and nothing. They've got to pull the trigger, which is pitched to Cam, where he rears back and slings it. Touchdown, Arizona State. They were officially, for the first time since the first quarter, within a single score, and now Texas was crumbling. I mean, look at the presence on this pump fake as Cam scrambles out to his right on the 2-point play. He takes a middle linebacker, corner, and safety with him because they know they are all needed to bring him down, leaving the middle of the field wide open to score. And it wouldn't just be Cam making miracles happen. Quinn Ewers was going to have to do his part by throwing a softball into tight coverage to give the ball back with 5 minutes left in the game. And now they've got to pull up all the stops. They line Cam up, not in the backfield, not in the slot, but have a man who's ran over a mile this game already set up as a wideout and just go. And on a hope and prayer, the ball is thrown his direction, and in nothing short of a miracle, maybe with a slight push off, he comes down with it. Arizona's most explosive run, pass, and now reception, all made by one man who just wants to damn win, as it wasn't long before he was once again plunging into the end zone himself. And shortly after running in for the 2-point conversion, he was puking on the sidelines between plays. He would not be denied. And 2 miracle missed kicks later by Texas and Arizona State were going to overtime. And not just that, but they were given the first drive, or once inside the 5, what do but hand it to Cam, who gets wrapped up, and for 99% of running back, the play ends here. He's outsized, has no leverage, has no chance in the end zone, but he spins through. He's churning his legs and gets pulled in. Ball now in Texas's hands, where unfortunately Quinn and this offense do what they should have been doing all game, which is finding Golden in the end zone as they immediately turn around and on one play get another score, just daring Arizona to answer the call. And just look at this first play. Look at how the secondary is trying to tackle him. This is what 4 quarters of getting your eyes rattled looks like as he picks up 12 yards. But in the end, the final play wasn't in his hands. They throw it and it gets picked off. But Cam this game accounted for 288 yards of offense alone. He accounted for 3 of their 4 touchdowns, and he had the Texas defense scared for their lives by the end of the game and single-handedly kept Arizona State in a game where people thought they had no chance, which is I don't think we're ever going to see another playoff game carried by one person than this one by Cam Skattebo.
Driving those legs.